I've been thinking about this little woman a great deal lately. Her name was Tenny Tolly Cagle, and she died on May 9th, 1984. I think her first name was Tenny, is actually a misspelling of her nickname, which was Tiny. Since she was born on July 14th, 1884, and she died on May 3rd, 1984, we know she lived to be 86. Other details of her life are uncertain. Her birth certificate gives Clay County, Georgia. Maybe not. She was never sure. Her husband, Robinson Cagle, on his death certificate notes that he was married to Ina Cagle. An accompanying document lists his wife as Ida Cagle. The misinformation seems endless. Tiny and Robinson were my neighbors for 2 decades. I have vague memories of them 40 years before, and I frequently saw them sitting on a bench below the old Welch and Cable store. Of course, that doesn't mean anything unless you're a native and you know where Welch and Cable was. They were waving at people on a bench, passing and calling out to friends. They attracted attention because they were a mismatched couple. Robertson was tall and lank. Tiny was not more than 4 feet tall. Due to her malformed spine, when standing, Tiny looked like a question mark. She was sensitive about her appearance, and she always attempted to face people, trying to avoid turning her back. When I knew her well enough to ask, I once inquired about the deformity. "A mean old boy hit me with a rake," she said. "I was just a baby." Then she smiled, which is something she did a lot, and she says, "Sit down right there and I'll get you a Coca-Cola." The little shack where Tana and Robinson lived was located in a bend of the Cherry Street Road that was thick in rhododendron and laurel, and in midsummer the foliage sometimes concealed most of the house, and a passing motorist might only get a catch of a glimpse of Tiny and Robinson's smiling face peering through all that rhododendron. People who walked by were often greeted by Tiny, who would often come into the road to talk to people. She would invite them to come on in and sit on the porch. I think it was then that I would often feel this odd couple were not of this earth. It was as though they originated in a fairyland, and it was filled with magical creatures, and that perhaps they had ventured through a magic door into our harsh world, filled with speeding cars and barking dogs. The door had closed and they were unable to return, and so they were condemned to stay here, dependent on the uncertain charity of our world. When I became a frequent visitor, I was sometimes visited inside, where I found an astonishing collection of cast-off items, 3-legged chairs, odd pieces of linoleum, all on a wooden floor, lots of religious pictures, a small wood stove, a ramshackle bed, and an ancient sink. I don't think there was an ice box. I think I was going to lose some of my writing here. Yeah. There was no hot water. There wasn't any indoor plumbing. But Tiny had a remarkable water system. It ran through a rubber tube. And I saw this. That tube was no bigger than my finger. And it ran from a neighbor's spring. And it ran under the road and into Tiny's kitchen. And it ran continually. In the summer, when the neighbor gardens were in full production, I would sometimes see baskets of tomatoes, beans, and okra. I remember once she came into the road and stopped my car, clapped her little hands and said, "Honey, I have a peck of peaches. Come and have one." If you didn't stop her, she would load a cracked plate with a mixture of corn cream, a can of Vienna sausage, a moon pie, and Ritz crackers. When I drove by in mid-December and saw smoke from the chimney, I wondered, what are they living on? It pained me to think of those two huddled in there, feeding wood to that little stove. Any inquiry was dismissed with a great beaming smile. "Oh, honey, we fine. We had eggs and a biscuit for breakfast." Did they? I hope so. Tiny had a habit sometimes that brought the local police to her house. She would stand in the middle of the road in that snug little curve that went around her house, and while she played sentinel, the places where she always stood, and it was called Tiny's Curve. The name had a certain irony since the term described this little woman's spine. Usually after a near mishap in which a vehicle had swerved into a ditch to avoid hitting Tiny, the police would explain why she could not stand in the road. Tiny would smile and nod. She would ask the policeman his name and ask him if he liked cats. That was the real problem. Tiny's cats. Early in the morning, they would come boiling out from under that little shack, a great multitude of orange, gray, and black, and Tiny would feed them. She had condensed milk, sacks of pellets, scraps of bread, meat. I think she must have spent the majority of every day gathering that feast, and she sat on a little stool, and she held court. Chanting a strange little nonsense song, she would talk to those cats. Each and every one had a name. Queenie, Rose, Billy, Mary, Lindy, Lou, Patchy, Blackie, Betty, Big Mouth, Sweetie, on and on. She inquired about their wounds. She checked them for problems. I guess she saw this coming. A week rarely passed without a fatality. I would drive by a mangled kitten on the road. Tiny removed them and buried them behind the house, and then she would say harsh things about cars and dogs. I remember a summer when I was sitting on the porch with Robinson, and he was telling me about the time he was snake bit some 40 years ago. And he would remove his shoe and trace a crooked scar with his finger. "I was working for the WPA," he said. "I was cleaning brush. I thought I was going to die after that, and I couldn't work without fainting." And in the midst of this tale, a car came. It was coming much too fast, and then, as always, Tiny was in the middle of the road. The driver swerved and skidded. He ended up with his SUV in the yard and just a few feet from where Robinson and I were sitting on the porch. An entire family stared at us, and we stared back. Meanwhile, Tiny was busy picking up gravel on the side of the road, and when she had a good handful, she came and threw it at the SUV. Robinson stood up and spoke to the driver. "I'm real sorry about that. She's crazy. I can't do a thing with her." By that time, Tiny had gathered another handful of gravel, which she threw at the windshield. And the driver made an attempt to back up and succeeded, and then decided to go out and talk to Tawny, who had gathered another handful of gravel. And the driver reconsidered and got back in his car and drove away. Tiny got him through the open window with a good handful of sand and a cloud of dirt and dust. And then Tiny returned to her post, checking out Cherry Street for cars and dogs. And Robinson went back to telling me about the hardships of working for the WPA, and Tiny went back to reporting on the dangers of living on Cherry Street. I see a red car. It's got a Georgie tag. It's down at the painter's. Might be that daughter that lives in Atlanta. Home for a visit. She prowled the road like some ancient mariner searching the seas for threats, her hands shielding her eyes. And then she announced, "Oh, black dog! It's prowling around the Cardin's barn. It's coming this way. Looks like a cat killer." All of this was 20 years ago. Tiny moved on, as it must. Time does as well. One morning as I was leaving for work, I found Tiny standing at the foot of the driveway. "I gotta go away," she said. "Both me and Robinson, they put me in the hospital, and I guess we'll end up in the county home." Tiny was crying now, but she was smiling, as always. "I was wondering if you would feed my cats." She grabbed my hand through the window. "I'll pay you back." I said I would. Tiny and Robinson had ended up in a complex social service agency that left them in different locations. Both were dead within 2 years. The machinery of progress swept up Cherry Street, took that little shack on Tiny's curve like some chaff in the wind. Nothing remained now except a space devoid of habitation, of cats, of interest. Okay, folks. I'm sorry, but I'm going to get a little sentimental here and say something corny, okay? If there's a heaven, I sincerely hope that there's a little rhododendron thicket there just outside the gates, and that Tiny and Robinson are sitting there in that fey little vine-covered shack, greeting the new arrivals. I would like to think that they got back into that magic land from whence they came long ago, when they crossed the boundary between heaven and Rhodes Cove. Of course, I also hope that there's no cars inside, and there's lots of cats on the porch. Thank you.